My name is Richard Watt. I've been an animal control officer for over 23 years in a small town in upstate New York with a local police department. I've been asked to come here and share my thoughts on cat licensing and control with you. The current laws in New York State for cats currently include New York State Ag and Markets cruelty laws apply to cats as well as other animals. New York State Department of Health law states that all cats must have a current rabies vaccination. And New York State Department of Environmental Conservation law states that anyone with a small game license may shoot a cat hunting or carrying a protected bird. Animal control officers, dog control officers, and nuisance wildlife control officers have no authority under existing laws to touch any cat. ACOs or DCOs can only handle cats when assisting a police officer when he has seized them on a cruelty case, when they assist the health department when one has bitten a person, and when some of us have to assist the DPW or highway departments in scraping a neglected cat off the road. Nuisance wildlife control officers may not touch a cat. Many municipalities refuse to pay vet bills for unidentified, injured, or sick cats, and I don't know of any law that requires them to do so. Cat licensing would provide funds and allow DCOs and ACOs to be able to find care for the cats. There would also be less sick, unidentified, or injured cats out in the public. The problems I see with free-roaming cats on my job, I see about as many cat bites as I do dog bites. While dog bites can inflict more physical damage, cat bites can cause more infections, and the chances of rabies exposure is much more common with a cat bite. Many times, little Sally tries to pick up cute Fluffy. Fluffy does not want to be picked up at all. Now we have to figure out who owns Fluffy. Oh no, ID? How do we find the owner? Is Fluffy currently vaccinated for rabies? Question mark. We have no idea who the owner is. Who pays the cost of a 10-day confinement or euthanasia and rabies test because we can't find the owner? What happens to the poor cat after the 10-day rabies watch? We get complaints from property owners about noise, fighting, cat crap in the garden, which is not good for a pregnant woman, damaged automobiles and screens, and also inciting the family cat who is wisely kept in the house. Oh, let's not forget about the odor of an unneutered male cat spraying near someone's door. Cats also cause accidents and traffic problems, and the cost of disposal of the road pizza. The damage to local wildlife populations is incredible. Cats are very good hunters. I have read that one outdoor cat hunting can be responsible for 265 birds killed a year. People think they also kill and eat mice, which they do, but that can cause the cats to become infested with worms. Damage to cats running at large, roadkill, predators, chemicals, especially antifreeze, legally set traps, parasites and disease. There are adults and juvenile delinquents who hate cats. There's incest breeding in feral cat colonies. Owned cats picked up by the TNR folks, and hunters spotting one hunting a protected bird. Outside cats live on an average of 3 miserable years, while inside cats live about 15 years. I receive many calls for lost cats that are never seen again. While many are hit on the road and crawl away to die, I suspect most in the town I work for are killed by predators, usually coyotes. Being killed by a predator is not an easy death. There is no easy death when it is left up to nature. Also, living in concentrated populations allows diseases to spread at a rate much greater than normal. I observed this fact in the 1990s when raccoon rabies hit this area, and our skunk and raccoon populations were very high. I have also observed the 3 upper respiratory diseases that cats are prone to run rampant in feral cat colonies and in cat hoarder cases. My take on the TNR Trap Neuter Release program. I think TNR is very well intended, but it is abandonment, which is illegal. In accordance with New York State Ag and Markets, Article 26, Section 374-5, any animal shelter or any organization incorporated to care for animals must either return any dog or cat in its care to the owner, or adopt it out, or euthanize it. By law, they cannot alter the animal and release it on private or public property. Also, trapping without a license and/or tagged traps is against New York State DEC laws. Releasing cats after assuming care for them is a violation of New York State Ag and Markets, Article 26, Section 353 and 355. The taking of an owned cat would be larceny of personal property. How do untrained and unlicensed trappers handle non-targeted wild animals that are caught by mistake in their traps? I get enough calls for non-targeted animals caught in the traps of people who have no business setting one. If ACOs and DCOs and nuisance wildlife control contractors can't handle cats by law, how can the TNR folks handle cats that they do not own? If they take custody of a cat, how can they abandon the cat when they are done? The ancestors of house cats did not evolve to live outside in the great Northeast environment. Feral cats lead short, miserable lives. I think euthanasia is more humane, and also more humane than a long life restrictively confined in a no-kill shelter. Free-ranging cats and feral cats are an invasive species outside. I would definitely recommend cat licensing. First of all, I have nothing against cats. I have been owned by several myself and watched TV with a cat in my lap and a dog on each side of the chair. But for their protection, cats should be licensed and identified. It would be both for rabies control and in case they escape so they can get back to the owner. Why can't that be done? Dogs also, to include not just a tag on the collar, but a microchip as well. They should also be neutered or spayed, as well as vetted, as per veterinarians' recommendations. Cats should be kept safely indoors where they belong. In the town I work for, I can offhand think of 9 feral cat colonies that I have encountered. I have seen much suffering. I have also seen a shelter refuse unadoptable cats that people attempt to turn in. I have taken many unidentified cat bodies to the town dump. For numerous reasons, I am strongly in favor of cat licensing, which would afford the cats the same legal protection and treatments as dogs.
I just wanted to talk about why we need cat licensing. My name is Sue McDonough, and I am a retired New York State Police investigator with the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. I was a police officer for 26 years. I spent those years enforcing the anti-cruelty laws of New York State. And it followed through in my retirement years. I still work on animal cruelty issues. Presently, I'm a cat owner, and I have been for my entire life. Cats are very near and dear to my heart. My present cat, Julie, who actually owns me, has been microchipped. If she goes outside, she is with me on a leash. And I also would strongly consider cat licensing. I would license her if that became law, just for the simple reason that if she ever got out on me, I would want to be sure that somebody would see that she is an owned cat and would pick her up and return her to me. My cat, Julie, she's a calico. She was a stray. I rescued her from a so-called feral cat colony. She was very sick, and after about $500 to get her well, she stays with me. She's in the house, and she's a family member. The New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law mandates that if any dog or cat is struck by a vehicle, the owner of the vehicle must try to locate the owner of the cat or dog. And if they cannot, they have to file a report with the police, and it's up to the police to try to find the owner of the animal. But without cat licensing, it's nearly impossible to do that. Studies have shown that there's about 90 million pet cats in the U.S. Some people consider feral cats to be wildlife. However, all cats are domesticated. They, under the New York state laws, they are considered companion animals, just like dogs. They cannot be forced to live in packs like some wild animals do, where they will get sick and diseased and starve and die off. The average stray or feral cat lives for about 3 years. Most farmers have a problem with an overabundance of cats. I've received many phone calls from farmers who have asked me what can be done about all the cats that are being abandoned on their property. They try to make phone calls to find people who will come and pick them up. Unless we have cat licensing, nobody is going to do this, and I have actually had farmers say that it's gotten to the point where they've had to take matters into their own hands and get rid of some of these cats because they actually have become very sick and diseased. Many years ago, there was no dog licensing. Dogs roamed freely. There were many stray dogs. Dogs were getting lost. Dogs were known to attack deer and other animals. They were biting people. Rabies was a problem, and so that's why dog licensing came into effect. And dog control officers were hired, and now people don't let their dogs roam anymore. They're either in a yard or on a leash, and I believe that the same consideration should be given to cats, as they are companion animals, just like dogs. There is no other way to determine if cats have rabies unless they're licensed and picked up by animal control. It's really the only way to control any rabies outbreaks. With licensing, you cannot get a license for a dog unless it has had a current rabies shot. So if cats are licensed, they would have to have a current rabies shot. So it is important that they are licensed. Trap, neuter, and release is actually reabandonment of cats that have already been abandoned. It is against the law. It is against the New York State Agriculture and Market Law, Article 26, Section 355 and 374, Subdivision 5. The law states that dogs and cats must either be returned to the owners if they are picked up, humanely euthanized, or adopted. There is nothing in the law that states that people can, or animal shelters can spay and neuter cats and then release them in the streets or reabandon them.
All right, thank you all for coming and to listen to me talk about cats. And I hope that I'll give you some good information today from my experience on working with cats. And it was hard to come up with a title for this, but decided to call it The Ethical Costs of Our Homeless Cat Dilemma, which it certainly is in this country and everywhere. Just give you a little bit of background on myself. Gail Mahachko is my name, as Val said, and I started Project Cat about 16 years ago. We're a small, private, open admission shelter, a nonprofit, and we're kind of unique. We're just very small, and basically our goal has always been to help take in needy cats, get them off the street, get them out of bad situations, and find homes for them, which is what we do a lot of, and we've been doing that for 16 years. And that's been our mission. And these are just some of the photographs that people sent us of cats that we've adopted out into homes. We love getting photographs, and this kind of really makes it all worthwhile when we see some of our cats, especially ones that came in bad condition, end up in great places like these. I called us an open admission shelter, and I just want to go through the two different main types. Open admission shelter is basically what all shelters used to be, where anytime you had a stray animal, or you couldn't keep an animal, or you found an injured animal, you took them to the shelter or to the pound, as they used to call them. There was no discrimination. They would take all animals in. The goal was to help animals. Unfortunately, they needed to euthanize a lot of them because there were always more animals than could be found homes for. And we are an open admission shelter, so we do euthanize at our shelter. These kinds of shelters are gradually being replaced by no-kill or limited admission shelters. Basically, those are ones where they don't want to euthanize, or they want to get their euthanasia rates way down, and so they're selective about which animals they take in. So they're only going to really take in ones that they can adopt out or that they can place, and they often put people on waiting lists to bring animals in. Basically, their goal is to reach no-kill status. So the alternative is to just not take animals into the shelter. Since we're an open admission shelter, I'm just going to go through these quickly. What we often do is end up taking in animals and responding to calls that are turned away by no-kill or limited admission shelters. Often these are hoarding situations with neglected cats. Could be in sheds, homes, basements, garages. These are just a few of some of the ones that we've taken in over the years, and oftentimes these cats are in very poor condition. There's just another example. That poor cat, along with another one, was locked in those cages for years, a couple of years anyway. And also we deal with outdoor situations where people are feeding them, they've gotten out of control, and now we go in there and try and help them. A lot of times these cats are feral, too aggressive, they can't be adopted out, and unfortunately they do end up being euthanized. But we do help with a lot of those situations on private property. So another thing that's important to remember is that our house cats that we keep indoors and what we call feral cats, or cats that are roaming around outside, they're all the same species. They're all Felis catus, and they're all domestic. Doesn't matter if the outdoor ones are feral or kind of wild, they're still domestic, the same species. Just to point out, domestic is any animal that's been selectively bred by humans and socialized to humans. So that's what we've done with cats, the same as dogs, any of our farm animals, sheep, chicken, etc. They're all domestic animals. Any of them have the potential to become feral. If they are out in the wild and they lose contact with humans, within a very short time, within generations, 1 or 2 generations or even less, they would become feral. Usually we use feral to refer to animals that are no longer dependent on humans. They are completely living on their own. So a lot of the cats that we call feral cats aren't really feral. They're being fed by humans. They're hanging around people. But there are some really wild ones out there that are completely existing on hunting, and they don't come into contact with humans at all. So that's a true feral. I'm guilty for throwing that term around also. And then non-native, exotic, or an introduced animal is any animal species inhabiting an area where it did not historically originate, and that is our domestic cat. I'm just going to do a quickie on these videos here. Just want to show that these cats they're the same species regardless of how different they might be. This little cutie pie, this is a domestic cat. If we advertise this cat on our website, people would be knocking down our doors to come get this little kitty. However, the same species can also be like this cat, which was, there's our sound. Domestic cat, she does have kittens in there, but she was extremely vicious. It took a long time to be able to get to her in that cage there. But this cat physiologically, biologically is no different than the one that was riding around on the Roomba machine. So fortunately that was just a glove and my hand was not in the fingers there. So I just want to show you that these are the same species. They have the same needs. As far as an estimate of the number of cats we have roaming around the country, their estimates are there are about 90 million free-roaming feral cats across the landscape in the United States. Almost as many, about 80 million, are owned by people, and they figure about maybe half of those, based on surveys, are indoor-outdoor cats. So about half the people who own cats leave their cats outdoors at some time or another. So if you include our 90 million plus half the cats that go out, it's about 130 million cats maybe roaming around the United States. And if you want to break that down into something that you can envision, that's about 34 cats per square mile, or about half a cat per person in the United States. Now, obviously, these cats aren't distributed evenly over the landscape. You have some that are more condensed in cities and in urban areas and so forth. And then the really wild ones out in the wild landscapes are not as abundant as that. But we don't know. It's very difficult to know how many really wild ones are living out there. So what we have now is that Felis catus, our domestic cat, is the only domesticated animal that we allow unfettered freedom across the landscape with no ordinances. Most places have no ordinances for cats, no controls in place, unlike we have for dogs. So as a free-roaming animal, as a free-roaming cat, Felis catus is now considered one of the top 100 invasive species in the world. It's wreaking havoc on our environment. So getting back to shelters, no-kill shelters, the push for shelters to stop euthanizing, and the push to instead practice trap, neuter, release on these cats that are not taken into shelters. The practice of this is just very misguided on all levels. A few things that I'll touch on is how cruel it is to the cats to be practicing this trap, neuter, release and turn them away from shelters. It's devastating to wildlife and to the environment. It's a huge health hazard, not only to humans, but to our wildlife also. And it's also an infringement of property rights, both on private and public lands. So, for anybody who's not totally familiar with trap, neuter, release, basically involves trapping these unsocialized or feral cats, if you want to call them that, sterilizing them so they can't breed anymore, clipping the ear, which you can see on this cat, this left ear they take the tip of that off. This guy, his right ear is clipped a little bit. These are two cats that came into our shelter. They were TNR cats, but they were in poor condition when they came in, and they were nice cats. They weren't feral cats. So they ended up at our shelter. They also received rabies vaccinations just one time. And then they're returned or released, or as we call it, reabandoned back outdoors. Some of these cats might be fed, some of them might not be. They might receive some kind of shelter, not all of them will. And some of them are be put back into what they call colonies, where you have a group of cats and somebody's feeding them. But keep in mind that colonies are not normal for cats. All cats are solitary creatures. The only cats that live in groups are lions. So we're creating these artificial colonies by putting food out and attracting the animals there. And then we create this mass of cats outdoors. One of the things that the groups that advocate for trap, neuter, release for these feral cats is that they're calling them community cats now. They don't want to refer to them as feral cats or stray cats or abandoned cats. They want to call them community cats to make it more appealing to the public to accept these outdoor cats as part of the community and part of nature, if you will. So it's a PR thing, public relations thing. Here are some of the feeding stations and shelters that some of these cats might be returned to. This is one that I worked at a while ago. This was an abandoned property. The town had taken it over. This was a building that was going to be taken down. But you can see the food bowls, shelters. There is one cat there. It's a little, right there. It's a long-haired tortoiseshell. Often they're very messy and dirty. Old food out gets moldy. This is one on somebody's porch. And another place that we worked at. This is a huge monstrosity in the middle of the woods. It was built on a flatbed pickup in the woods, and you could see the paper plates and everything littered all around. So this is kind of a typical example of these feeding stations for cats. Feeding outdoor cats also attracts wildlife. Raccoons love to eat cat food, possums, skunks. Fox may come in, coyotes may come in, not to eat the cat food, but to eat the cats. And what happens then is people complain about the wildlife, and then the wildlife ends up getting removed, relocated, or killed to protect the cats. There's also an increased chance of disease transmittal between the cats. Here's a little video we have here of a cat eating at a feeding station, and here comes a raccoon. Cat's not very happy. The raccoon's not really bothered in this case. But you can see this can be set up for a lot of problems. There could be a fight, and if the raccoon was rabid, that could be a real problem there. So what I've learned over the years is the premise of no-kill shelters and trap, neuter, release is to do whatever's necessary to keep excess unadoptable cats from entering shelters where they might be euthanized. That is the goal, okay? It's not really a goal to decrease the population, which is what you hear a lot. That's old hat. That's not really what's being done, and that's not their goal, okay? And they want to save all these cats regardless of the cost to others, including the cats themselves. As far as the cats being outdoors, whether they're neutered or not, outdoor free-roaming cats will suffer and likely be victims of. These are all cats that have come through our shelter. Cat fights, animal attacks by who knows what, teeth and gum disease, hit by car, and that one didn't come into the shelter, but these are all things that happen to all cats outdoors at some time or another. Freezing to death, that little kitten was found frozen to death right next to a food bowl. Frostbitten ears, amputated tail. I don't know how that cat got that gash on its head. Could be from a great horned owl. Great horned owls take cats. This poor guy was picked up in the frigid winter. It was like in the teens. He was sitting under that truck. We trapped him. He was just in horrible shape. That leg was mangled. You can see the holes in there. What happened to him, I don't know. You can see the ribs on his rib cage. He's got no fur there. And he was out there in like teens weather. So it was a horrible situation. Cancers and tumors. Cats outdoors get them. Indoor cat would get some treatment, but these guys won't. Leukemia and FIV. Both those cats on the right tested positive for FIV. Upper respiratory viruses. Those are rampant, are highly contagious. It's the bane of all shelters. All these cats have upper respiratory virus here. Some of them go on to be chronic carriers, and they never get over it. That one in the lower right there does have an ear clip. That was an outdoor cat. She ended up having an entropic eyelid, which turns in, and the eyelashes scrape against the cornea. We actually were able to fix her up for the person. The person didn't want to give her up, and we actually had surgery done to correct that eye. But that's not the norm. Painful hair mats, people don't think about that, especially on long-haired cats. That one we just finished shaving the whole side of the body there, which was just one big mat, and now then we started working on the back here. I don't know if you could see it. These are all fecal mats stuck in the fur. So it was completely just, anytime it pooped, it just got stuck in the fur there and got backed up there. And then of old age, this little blind girl was wandering around the road. She was ancient. And then abuse from humans, whether poisoning, shooting, or torturing. Cats with arrows in them seem to have been common last year. This one did not come into our shelter. But these TNR cats, when things like this happen to them, nobody takes care of them, or it's very rare. And outdoor cats will eventually succumb to one of these things. They're going to die one day. They're going to die out there somehow. And so our question is this more humane than euthanasia? For cats that we can't find homes for, that there is no room to put them, why do people want to do this? That's the question I'm going to pose to you today. I know what our choice is. And then if you look at the impact that cats have on wildlife and the environment, cats are what's termed super predators, and they're reflex hunters. Just play with your cat and watch how it darts after things. If something moves, it goes after it. And there has been a study that showed there are two different pathways in the brain of the cat, one for hunger and one for hunting. So their movement, they're chasing small things, is not necessarily tied to hunger. When people TNR cats and they put them out and they feed them, they're basically ensuring that the cats live longer and in higher densities than any native predators. So these cats are predators out there, and they're now competing with our native predators, the ones that are really needed for the ecosystem. Hawks, owls, fox, even though those will eat cats, they're still competing with them. They're eating the same prey. So what we have now is that the cat is a subsidized exotic predator. We're feeding it so it can hunt. In 2014, a very important study came out looking at the impact of cats on wildlife and particularly on birds. And this is kind of a mid-range estimate. It was estimated that cats kill 2.4 billion birds per year in this country alone. Over 10 billion small mammals, along with millions of amphibians and reptiles. Don't know if you can read this, but this bar on the left here is obviously, these are birds, 2.4 billion killed by cats, and it's comparing it to other anthropogenic sources of bird kills. This would be window hits, when birds fly into windows. Can I read this? Automobiles, can you read from there? Power line collisions, communication towers, electrocution, agricultural chemicals, poisons, and then wind turbines. So you can see cats have a much greater effect than all of those put together. Only habitat loss caused by humans causes greater bird mortality. And these are just some examples. Some of these are from wildlife rehabilitators. A white-breasted nuthatch up in the left, its wing is mangled. There's a cat with a bunny, and then a cat that came into a wild rehabber there with wounds. And yes, cats do go after snakes also. Another wildlife rehabber, a robin whose wing was completely mangled. And this is actually an ear clip cat. It does have an ear clip, and it is carrying a woodpecker in its mouth. And even animals that aren't killed directly by the cats often die from cat bacteria. So it only takes a little nick on the animal. And like if your outside cat brings you a bird or a chipmunk and you look at it and you think it's okay and you let it go, chances are pretty good it's not going to survive because of the bacteria. If they get to a rehabber, they will get them on antibiotics right away. And cats don't just take small birds. Some of these cats are pretty mean hunters. That's an American coot, which is a pretty large-sized water bird. And there's a cat stalking a great egret. This was down in the marshes on Long Island just this summer, or spring, I guess. And a cat with a Bonaparte skull. That was down in Florida. The bird was alive. The woman got it from the cat, and she let it go, not knowing that she should have taken it to a rehabber, so we don't know what the outcome was. But these cats go after big birds. And studies show that even just the presence of a predatory cat can deter a bird from nesting or interfere with feeding of the young if it's already nested there. Because if there's a predator in the area, the birds usually don't go back to their nest right away. Nestlings and ground nesting birds are especially vulnerable to predation on cats. And if the adults are killed during nesting season, they've just lost out on their reproductive capabilities because you not only killed adults, but you kept them from reproducing. Just want to point out here that this is an example of some other cat shelters at Jones Beach, New York, where the piping plover, threatened piping plover nests, that's them on the bottom there, an adult with a chick. And in 2016, the American Bird Conservancy filed a lawsuit with New York Office of Parks to get these cat shelters and cats removed because they're threatening these nesting plovers. The other thing I'd like to focus on a little bit is the health hazards that cats pose because there are so many of them outdoors, and rabies should be the first one that comes to everybody's mind. It's interesting, on the drive up, I was listening to Radiolab on NPR, and it was a half-hour show about rabies. But anyway, these TNR cats that are put out, they are given a rabies vaccine, but they're only ever given one. And if you look at all the literature from the CDC, rabies compendiums and so forth, a second booster the following year is required to make the animal fully immune to rabies. And they never receive that. So it's a real problem there. And cats are 4 times more likely to contract rabies than dogs, because with dog ordinances, we pretty much, and vaccination of dogs, we pretty much eliminated the canine rabies variant in this country. Cats are now the #1 domestic animal for which humans receive PEP vaccinations. Those are post-exposure prophylactic vaccines. So if you get bitten or scratched by a cat and the animal either tests positive for rabies or the animal runs off and you can't get it, you get these vaccines to prevent you from getting rabies. And Pennsylvania has a big problem with rabies, and so does Florida. There seems to often be something in the news from those 2 states involving cats and rabies. Toxoplasma gondii, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. There's a lot of research being done on this. It's a protozoan pathogen. Cats are the definitive host for it. It breeds only in the intestines of cats, and all cats, large wild cats also. It's that toxoplasmosis is what it causes, and it's that disease that pregnant women are told to be careful of if they have a cat and scooping the litter box. You just need to be careful. And if not, it causes fetal death in pregnant women. The interesting thing is that there are a lot of studies that are now linking this organism to late life diseases such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Alzheimer's, and also risk-taking, which is pretty interesting if you read up on any of that stuff. It's also responsible for the deaths of our marine mammals. This organism is shed in the fecal matter of cats. It gets into the soils and the waterways, and it can persist for up to 18 months. And it's really affecting a lot of our wildlife. It's found in a lot of deer. There's a study done in Ohio. Over half of the white-tailed deer there tested positive for it, and over half of the cats tested positive for it also. It's a hazard on farms, whether you have animals or vegetables. So people can get it either through ingesting it, actually you don't wash your hands, or you don't wash your vegetables enough, or you eat meat that's not cooked thoroughly. And once you're infected for life. This is a very interesting organism. It's been around forever, but the problem is we now have such a high density of cats out in the environment, and they're depositing tons and tons of fecal material, potentially with these oocysts. Just a little thing about TNR. There's a lot of misinformation out there about it. There are no peer-reviewed studies anywhere that show that TNR actually reduces populations of cats. You hear from organizations that promote it that TNR works. The only way it works, what they mean when it works, is that it keeps cats out of shelters. Some shelters aren't even taking cats in anymore. And they're reporting that their cat intake is down because of TNR. But it's just because they're not taking the cats in. They're diverting them back outside to TNR programs. They're not taking them in the shelter. They don't have to euthanize them. And they're saying, look, TNR works. It keeps cats out of shelters, but it's not reducing the population. It's really important to understand when you hear that stuff, how they manipulate the words and the language that they use. Some of the myths about TNR that they put out there as to why this works, saying that it reduces free-roaming cat populations. It doesn't. If you look at mathematical models, you have to sterilize 71 to 94% of a population just to maintain it at its current level. And you have to sterilize over 95% to actually decrease the population. That's totally impossible to do with all the free-roaming cats. Currently, the sterilization rate is less than 2%. It's a non-realistic goal. TNR people say these artificial colonies of cats keep other cats from moving in. Again, that's just not true. Usually you get incoming cats through immigration, and your colony persists. They often use the vacuum effect, saying that if you trap and remove these cats and euthanize them, more cats will just move in. Again, that just doesn't prove to be true. It's a non-scientific reason that they use, and what they don't tell you is if they remove cats for adoption, why don't cats move in if they remove them for adoption? So it just doesn't hold true. And we removed lots of cats from places, from private property and so forth, and no cats are moving in. There would have to be a constant supply of them to move in. So a lot of these things you need to do research on and see that these things just don't hold true. And this comes out every year, telling people to keep their animals inside. If it's too cold for you outside, it's too cold for them. And there's a dog curled up in the snow and a cat. These are put out by TNR advocates. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. They want you to keep your pet cats in. The cold is affecting these feral outdoor cats also. It's hypocritical. Actually, that one woman down at the bottom on that Facebook page asked that same question. Why do feral cats do okay outside in the cold? They're no different than your house cat. They don't do okay. And just like to end up here with why we're pushing for communities to get licensing and cat ordinances to help control the cat population. Neither trapping and euthanizing or the TNR it's gonna have little effect on the outdoor cat population because you just can't trap enough of them. You'll just never get ahead. We need to stop the source of new cats, which come from irresponsible owners, people who abandon them. And we need to put the onus of responsibility on them, just like we do with dogs. And it can work. You just need to change the way people think. You need to change, there needs to be a paradigm shift in the way we view our cats. They're not just throwaway, toss away animals that can go and live outdoors when we don't want them anymore. We need to treat them as pets, as domestic pets that they are. And that's just another summary. They're saying that we would suggest mandatory spay-neuter, licensing and microchipping, leash and containment laws. If we want them to go outside, to keep them on your own property. People do it with dogs. You can do it with your cats. No feeding of outdoor feral cats, and just make owners be responsible. And that is the end. Thank you very much.